Lost Media.
Mixed Grounds is proud to present I Just Wanted to Push Record, celebrating arts, community, and culture. Part of the Olas Media Network.
Welcome to I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast, where lifestyle, arts, community, culture, and production meet. Two producers, two cultures, and a whole lot of flavor. Join hosts Lena and JC for fun conversations, cool interviews, sharing tips, laughing through production hiccups, and celebrating the art of it all. Ready to roll? It all starts with pushing record.
Producers Podcast, where arts, community, and culture collide together. I am your host, JC, and it's an honor once again to be able to bring you some of the things that most people may not know about. And on this historic week in America, in the world, I have to let you know that I have a very special guest. And I know everybody always says that. They say, oh, I've got a very special guest, and this is somebody for you. But I can say that with authenticity and being unapologetic, because the guest that I have with us today is not only a friend, I consider him a part of the brotherhood with me, and we've seen some things. And so you get a very, very special opportunity to kind of hear some of the people that I've had to be a part of in my life and have blessed me along the way. Speaking of blessings, I want to make sure that we give a nice blessing to our sponsor, Mixed Grounds. Mixed Grounds Coffee, located in Logan Heights in San Diego, has provided a place for all of us to really experience exactly what we do here. And I just want to push record, which is celebrate arts, community, and culture. And I got breaking news. They are going to have the grand opening of their new location in North Park on February the 1st. You need to go check them out. They're in the building of AMP 30. If you know, then you know. But they've got a brand new spot, and all they did is take what they were doing over in Logan Heights for the last 2 years, and they put it to another scale. And so we're going to get Qua back on and kind of talk about what they're going to do. But today, I had to make sure that we mark a special week, like I told you. For me personally, it's on a lot of different notes. One, within the last 25 days, we have laid to rest and had an observance for Jimmy Carter, one of the presidents of the United States of America, 37th president of the United States. And in the same month, we've actually had inauguration of our 47th president of the United States. In addition to that, we have had on multiple coasts, natural disasters throughout our country. And all of these things are historic moments that have affected the country, affected who we are in so many different ways of our lives. Many of us, especially those of us that have family and friends in San Diego and in LA, have been affected by the fires in California. We're looking at historic frigid temperatures in not only the East Coast, but also in Louisiana and in Florida. And at the time of this recording, we are the week of the inauguration, where we are celebrating the President of the United States, number 47, Donald Trump, coming into his era of leadership for our great nation. And so it's an honor to be able to have Mr. Broderick Thomas with us today, who has not only shown himself to be a great author, but like I told you before, he's a good friend of mine. And he and I have spent hours over drinks sometimes without a drink. And we've agreed, we've disagreed, we've made great points. And I can say in all honesty that he's changed my life. And that's, again, why I feel like this is a very special episode. Broderick, thanks for joining us on I Just Want to Push Record.
My man, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
And I'd be remiss. Normally, what I always tell producers is the best way to let somebody be introduced is to let them introduce ourselves. But I just want to show you what I know about you, right? Like, okay. Of course, I have to do a little bit of research, but a lot of this stuff I already knew. And so when I started my outline, the first thing I sat down and I said, the first thing I wanted to bring to the table is that this is a man of values, right? And then what that led to is that this is also a man of faith, as the minister that you are. This is also a man of integrity, as the father, grandfather, and husband that you are, that I know you to be. In addition to that, when we sit there and talk about arts, community, and culture, if you don't check all the boxes, I don't know who does. As someone who advocates for the community, someone who has affected the community in just being a serial entrepreneur, like being able to affect buying power for people, or being able to supply things that otherwise wouldn't be celebrated. And then just the arts. One of the things we're going to spend a lion's share of the time talking about today is that I've always known you as an author. You're probably one of the first dudes I know that came to me and introduced himself and said, "Hey, you know what, man? Oh, I got a book. I got a couple of you want a book?" And I got signed copies of that, and I even gave one to my father. And the other component that I think people should know too, that how we met actually was in the media world. You and I both worked with what is now Nexstar. You had a local affiliate in one of the publishing fields that went digital at one of the most pivotal times in the media world. And you were there. And I think that's where we got into most of where we got a chance to kind of bounce things off the walls for debate. So when I think about the things of who Broderick Thomas is to me, those are the things that jump out. Fill in some of my gaps. How else would you want to be introduced?
Man, I think you covered a lot of it. I remember back in those days when we were on campus for Media General, and we just started kind of hanging out with each other because I was running the digital advertising department and you were over in the production side. And I needed help, and I remember you being one of the few people that would sit me down and teach me about the things that I didn't know, which made me better to do my job. And so from there, we just started to collaborate a little bit. And next thing you know, we're hanging out all the time. As you said, sometimes with drinks, sometimes with not. So I was a little nervous when you said you was going to tell everything you knew about me. I might not want everybody to know. But it's cool, man. You as well, you've been an asset in my life. I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate the conversations we have. I appreciate the fact that you're just always one of those guys that just shows up. You know what I mean? And so that's important to me. And so in this space, man, anytime I think of somebody that can actually help propel me to another level in any type of projects that I'm doing, particularly if it's in the space of media, you're one of those first names because I trust you and you're an expert at it. I mean, your work is phenomenal. So filling in the gaps, it's not many, man. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my grandkids. I love making money. I love, well, let me go back and so then that is no respective order.
Right.
I also love God. I love being able to talk about God with people and being able to introduce them into their lives as well. So those are the things that outside of that, the only thing I can say that this one might get you a little bit. I love my Denver Broncos, man. I told him on my tombstone, I want him to etch in. He loved God, he loved his family, and he loved his Denver Broncos.
Yeah. Well, I purposely left off the part about it being, within the last historic 20 days that we also saw unexpected Denver Broncos. Not unexpected to you. Let the record reflect that this man has called that this Broncos team was going to be like this all the way down to Bo Nix, making sure we don't take a tangent. But that also came to an end. So I want you to know that I had some compassion. And I didn't bring that out.
If I can toot my own horn, I also called that, in my opinion, this was before the draft, that I thought Jaden Daniels was the best quarterback in the draft. My wife, who was a Commanders fan, I told her once they had Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury in place, I watched some of the free agencies. I made the call that if the Washington Commanders drafted Jaden Daniels, they would at minimum make the playoffs this year. I couldn't even have imagined the AFC Championship, but that kid is something special, and I called him too.
Yeah, listen, I give credit where credit is due. I couldn't even spell Jaden right if you had asked me, a month ago. But it's interesting that you bring up the Commanders because that's even historic, right? Like when you start talking about leadership and you start talking about the things, just the values. I was going to give you more flowers about. You've always been very value centered. Like I've always known you to be a disciplined young man, someone who says, if I'm going to do something, then I'm going to do it. But if I tell you I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And then I was going to go and ask you about the military, but before I get all over the place, one of the things that I look at is that you sit in a place of you have spent a great deal of your time investing your life, your talents, your wisdom into what the people call the DMV. And I have to, for the privilege of our audience back west who may not know what the DMV is. It represents the district, which is Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. despite what
Yeah.
you might hear about other things. And you've done a great job in really being fluid within this space, right? Like we met obviously in the capital of the Commonwealth in Virginia. But then since then, you now reside in the DC area,
Yes.
which has allowed you to also be, very active in the community. In this time, like we're talking about coming off an election year, coming off, talk about some of the things that you've done as a community advocate, as a political advocate in these spaces, and how navigating that this is a unique area, right? Like you're talking below the Mason-Dixon line, up to the Mason-Dixon line, and where the leader of the free world resides and reigns supreme.
Yep.
Help the people understand how that's kind of impacted your life and where you are now.
I mean, it's a complex kind of dynamic because you're right here at the seat of power from a national perspective. But then when you look at the localities like your Alexandrias, your Fredericksburgs, you cross over into Maryland, into Fort Washington and Oxon Hill, and then you also have the district. All of them have their unique personalities as localities, and so just kind of working that. So in Alexandria, which is where most of my um, political engagements happen at. I am the vice chair for the Alexandria GOP unit here. And I also sit on the 8th district seat for Virginia, the board of the 8th district for Virginia. And we kind of oversee that's Alexandria, Arlington, some of Fairfax, and Falls Church. And so you get into those areas. And one of the things I've seen is that it's a heavily blue area. It's a lot of liberals and Democrats, however you want to do the labels, and that's always been kind of odd to me because I thought that such an affluent area would have more conservatives involved because most people that are wealthy are concerned, if for nothing else, in being able to keep their money and reduce taxes. So that's big for me. But it's been an interesting mix since I've been up here to be able to kind of learn the area and the dynamics of it, um, and just kind of get my hands into it. I think at the end of the day, one of the things that I am working on, both in those capacities, and I guess I should have mentioned in my own capacity, I'm an executive director for a PAC that I started with a partner called Conservative Voters Coalition. And so one of the things that I get to do in that platform is just to actually be able to do some freelance work. And in my mind right now, I'm really big in kind of rebranding the Republican Party. I'm a conservative, really don't care about the party labels, but the party is the legal entity for conservatives, and so I'm really kind of engaged in trying to change the brand to make conservatives or the conservative party the party of common sense, right? I think that when people get up and go to work every day, they're concerned about traffic and how much traffic there'll be, and particularly in this area, to get to their jobs. They're concerned about safety in their communities and for their kids. They're concerned about the education. And again, I'm speaking primarily for Alexandria, but I think it trickles out across the entire DMV. And they're concerned about affordable housing. These are the things that bother me when I wake up and affect my household. When you get into the ideological principles of, gun rights, abortions, all of those types of things, yeah, they matter, but they don't matter to me on a daily basis. And so one of the things I want to do is to kind of rebrand the Republican Party as a party of common sense to where we give sensible solutions to those things and help people understand how we can make your life better, particularly at the lower level. So that's kind of some of the work that I'm into. I feel like, this is a special country. And I feel like that you are starting to see people be less and less loyal to the idea of being an American, right? Like they are just shifting to things that are away from our core cultures. Um, and that's the problem for me. It bothers me. I served my country in the United States Air Force for a few years, and when I look at the things that people put their lives for every day, I don't see that value being ingratiated by your everyday American. So that's kind of where I'm at. Some of the things I'm working on. I'm always an advocate for conservatism. I'm always exceptionally an advocate for Black America. I do run an organization, an online community called Black Brick Society, and that is about empowering and enhancing the Black business owners across our country. So we can get more into that later if you want to. But yeah, it's things like that that I'm involved in.
No, I think the beautiful thing about it is that you set the stage, because one of the things that, when you and I finally caught up most recently, you were talking about the new release of the book, right? 5 Questions for America from the Mind of a Black Conservative. And I think for me, I think it's just awesome because it hits the construct of a lot of different, pun intended, questions that people have right now. So we're going to go there. We're going to go there.
Okay.
But one of the things that I want to look at, you talked about your military service. I think, from the art component that I recognize out of you is that you are a multi-published author, right? And I think that, to me, I think that speaks to your character too, where the discipline that it takes, the conviction, the courage, dare I say, that it takes to actually write your thoughts down on paper and say, hey, and I want to share it for your possible consumption. I think there's something admirable about that. And I don't know that I've ever told you that, but that's something that I admire about you that I think is awesome. But in this iteration of it, I think it even holds true more of a gift that you've given to culture. So your community advocacy that you've done, mixed with your own personal art, which is the authorship that you do, I see it immediately how it pours over to enriching the culture, because what you've done is to put down, for those who don't want to say it out loud, who don't want to say that, hey, this is something that I'd be curious about, if nothing else, you've done it. You've done it. And so I'd like to dig into, before we jump dead into the book, I'd love to see what's the impetus, like what, because you have other books that what is it that makes, and let the people know I call you BX, what makes BX say, yeah, this is book deserving. This is book deserving.
So if I'm being honest, so at this point, I only have 2 books that are published. I've written about 5, but the other 3 are unpublished. But this is my second time publishing a book. And the first time I did it was 2007. And I think for me, if I'm being perfectly honest, it was just something to do, right? I was going through, it was because it was a book about relationships. So I was going through issues in my relationship at the time. I had family members that were, on the verge of divorce. And so, and I have female family members that would call me and say, hey, uncle, hey, brother, what do you think about this from a man's perspective? And so as I was just advising some of these women in my circle at the time, I just started to jot some of that stuff down. And it was just like, hey, this might make a book. Let's just put this down and see what happens. So it was really just kind of something to do. My book that just released on Monday is far more significant to me because there's a purpose to it. And I was very strategic about it this time. I put research into the book and all of those different types of things, a strategy for bringing it to market. But I'll share this with you, JC. As we get older, because I'm a little bit older than you, I'm 52 now. And as men, as we get older, it becomes my drive becomes a lot less about making money, and it becomes more about my legacy, what I am instilling in my kids and my grandkids, what I'm leaving for my family, and what I'm leaving for the earth to say, hey, I was here, right? And so this book has a lot more meaning because it speaks about some truths of certain issues that I see. And I've always been one of those people laugh at me when I do it, but if somebody's in a conversation, I'll just raise my hand. You know what I mean? And people laugh at it, but I do it for a reason, because we were taught this in grade school. If you have something to say, don't interrupt anybody else, raise your hand and we'll get to you. And so rather than cut across somebody, I'll just throw my hand up, let them know, hey, I got something to say. I got a question when you get done with what you're saying, but I don't want to interrupt you. So I just give you a symbol of, I got something to say.
And I have to say, let me verify that has happened. sitting at the island in our men's gym. Shout out to our man Ralph, to brother Mathis. It has happened where we're having either heated conversations, funny conversations, and all of a sudden the room goes quiet because everybody focuses in on BX because he's got his hand raised. So I can attest to that on many occasions.
Yeah, man. That's just my way of saying I got a question. And so, as I was looking at some things that had really bothered me, particularly over the last 4 years in the political space and in our government, I was kind of like, I got a question about some of these things. And so one night I was literally kind of, sitting around. Actually, I was up at 4:00 in the morning. I took my phone and started jotting a few questions down. A few days later, I put it on paper, man, and just started talking about some of the things that needs to answer them. But to go back to your question, there are things that I think about all the time that I feel like probably need to be heard, and I can't possibly put all of that on paper. But this was one of those times, like I said, as pertains to my legacy. I wanted to have a voice in the space, and I wanted to challenge people to actually think about some stuff on a real level. Like, let's ask some real questions, and let's not, hide around it or anything like that. I want to be able to have conversations. I want people to be able to have conversations because I think that's what draws us closer together rather than drives us apart. I was in a meeting last week and I was sitting with two white gentlemen and we were talking about something that was race sensitive. And so I just stopped the conversation and say, hey guys, listen, it's okay with me for us to talk about Black issues at this table. You don't have to tiptoe around it. There's walk like you on broken glass or anything like that. Let's say what we got to say because we'll probably learn a lot more by having a conversation than trying to be politically correct. So let's just say what we got to say and let's have some conversations because I feel like that's what drives things forward. You know what I mean?
And you say, and then one of the things that you say or that said about the book is that this is a tool to confront the defining issues that are shaping our nature's future. And I think because for me, I was totally immersed in the inauguration events. One because in full disclosure, one of the things that I just love about this thing that we call politics is that for every pundit that thinks that they know everything and how it's going to go, and for every poll that exists, every lobbyist that is out there, for every PAC, there is still a nuance that still makes us tune in. It's almost like we were talking about the NFL before. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that happen in the background. Everybody's like, it's the NFL and it's this and it's that. There's still an element of, but I need to participate and I need to be aware that I still have. And that's either going to go down in history as my naivete or that's just, this is just who I am. I am still a very active member in the political process, right? And, we've talked about it before. You and I may not align on all of our, our values and what we look at in a candidate or what have you, but we've still been able to have those conversations. And so when I saw that you released this book, I thought it was awesome because I think this is confronting some of those issues. This is us as Black men who may not agree, have different views, be at different periods in our life, have different things that mean, where we are. So I'm sure you can remember at a certain time, maybe your profession was number one, right? And then maybe at another time it was like, oh no, I got to take care of my youngins. But then now it's like, but now my youngins are good, so I'm going back to my profession. But wait, now I got grand youngins, so now, like these things shift, right? It's dynamic, right? And I think a lot of times when we watch mass media and we see how it's portrayed, it is almost a zero-sum game or an absolute type of conversation. And I wonder sometimes, do we have the nuance of thought in the next generation or those who are around us, our contemporaries? And I think maybe when you talk about confronting these issues, maybe that's what this book does.
I think so. And you brought up a couple of good things because you talked about the idea that you and I don't always agree on ideology or certain subjects or whatever. And that's okay. When I do my podcast, I always want people to know I am never trying to convert anybody to anything. My objective is to give you some thought-provoking information to possibly make you think about things differently. And if you take the information I give you, you process that, and you still say, nah, I like my way, I'm okay with that. If you're a Democrat, I show you some conservative things and you say, nah, my way is better, I still believe in this, I'm okay with that, right? If you're something other than a Christian and I tell you about, Jesus Christ, and you say, nope, not for me, you made that decision, but you've heard my information, I'm okay with that. And so that leads into your most recent point of we're watching television, which one of my friends always talks about. Understand that when you're watching, particularly as we call it mass media or mainstream media, you're getting information from a company that is owned by someone. And so there can be narratives behind what the information that is coming from that outlet, as far as what you're able to consume, because somebody's trying to drive a point. Whether it's politically charged, whether it's financially charged, or whatever. So understand, when you receive information, don't just take that hook, line, and sinker. Do some research. Think things through. Just because someone tells you something doesn't mean you just have to take that hook, line, and sinker. Do some research. Think about, does it make sense to you? Like, does it jive with your spirit? And then from there, make your decisions on how you move from that. That's something that's very important to me. And that's why I release a lot of information sometimes. And if I am talking about something, it's something that I feel like if I provide this information to more people, maybe people can make better decisions.
No, I think it's awesome. I think for me, that speaks to also in the book, like being able to really go back and investigate some of the history, right? Like when you talk about doing the research, sometimes research is just investigating the history of how you felt in that moment versus where we are right now. And I think from what I've seen from the book so far, I think that you're going to do a great job in spelling that out for a lot of people. I've always been about just provoke the question. I get nervous. I get nervous, and we've shared this when we were in Big Sky. I get nervous when people stop questioning, right? If like when we just automatically go into this autopilot of, okay, well, if you said it, then okay, fine. And there's nothing that from our formative years or even our preschool years that's ever been that way. We've always, as a being, have been inquisitive. As an infant, I would sit there and say, huh? I'd pause. I'd wait. I may not have the answer. I didn't have to be disrespectful and throw a tantrum, maybe not. But I was able to be inquisitive, and it was received as such. It's only at a certain age and certain life experiences where we get that if someone questions what it is that we think we know to be true, that we then immediately deem them not worthy of having a place in this conversation. So let me shut you down. And so it's inspiring to see someone not saying, hey, believe what I'm saying, versus, hey, let's just ask a question. And so I think I want to get into question the title of the book and how you came up with it and what it means. But first, as you know as well as I do, we have to pay some bills. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Broderick Thomas, author of the brand new book, 5 Questions for America from the Mind of a Black Conservative. You're listening to I Just Want to Push Record, an Oldest Media podcast brought to you by Mixed Grounds. We'll be right back.
Just taking a quick pause here. Enjoying the convo so far? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more fun, tips, and stories from Lena and JC.
Mixed Grounds Coffee, founded in 2020, is where culture brews community. Located in San Diego's Logan Heights district, this Vietnamese-owned micro-roastery brings you the world's finest beans roasted in small batches. Mixed Grounds is proud to present I Just Wanted to Push Record on the Olas Media Network, celebrating arts, community, and culture.
Like we talk about in the show, there are a lot that goes into a successful podcast, more than just pushing record. Whether you're new or seasoned, if you're looking for someone to make your great show idea a reality, then we've got your back. Check us out at olasmedia.com and see how we can help you push record on your next big project. The Dear San Diego podcast is produced in collaboration with The Times of San Diego. Repeatedly recognized by the San Diego Press Club, The Times of San Diego delivers timely and transparent news to, for, and about America's finest city. To learn more on how you can support this trusted resource of information, visit timesofsandiego.com.
And we are on. Oh, wait. I almost forgot to push record. Now over to Lena and JC.
And welcome back to I Just Want to Push Record. This is JC, and I have the privilege of sitting with my dear brother and friend, Broderick Thomas, author of 5 Questions for America from the Mind of a Black Conservative. And I mean, the first thing that probably comes up that everybody's going to want to know, if this is a book that's going to confront the defining issues of the nation, move us beyond partisan divides, and it's coming from the idea of a Black conservative, what the hell are the 5 questions?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a really good question. Like I said, and there are so many more questions to be answered, JC, you know this, than just 5. But these are 5 that just happen to come into my mind. Middle of the morning, I'm up at 4 a.m. just thinking about some stuff. And so the first question is, why is the most prevalent conversation in our country about whether we should or should not be able to kill unborn children? So for me, that was a huge thing because I worked on some campaigns up in the area, and it seemed like we were doing a lot of debate prep with the candidate and things like that, and a lot of it centered around abortions. Here's a local candidate that probably won't ever get to have a vote on abortions because that goes through the national level in our Congress and the Supreme Court and things like that. But yet it was the hugest issue, and I'm like, why do we always have to talk about this, right? Like, can you have an abortion? Can you not have an abortion? Can you kill the baby, not kill the baby? What does that have to do with the economy of the city of Alexandria? What does it have to do with the housing and all those kinds of things? So it was frustrating to me during that time just to see that was so prevalent of a conversation, and when it came down to doing elections. My second question is, why is our government more concerned with protecting and providing for the citizens of other countries than its own? And so I think everybody can kind of understand what that is. We've seen a lot of immigration over the last few years, and undocumented immigrants, as they call them. I still call them illegal immigrants. But being able to receive all of these benefits, they were getting these debit cards that you use for food and housing and all of those kinds of things. Third question is, why is sexual orientation and gender identity such a prevalent issue in the home, schools, businesses, and government of our countries? Hey, man, I think sexuality should be a personal thing. It should be a private thing, right? I don't need to know who you're sleeping with. I don't need to know what your preferences are. But certainly not to the extent, even if you want to share that, certainly not to the extent where we're talking about rights for a protected class. I think that's a big issue of itself. And if you want to talk about that later, I will. But again, that's one of those landmines I don't mind stepping on. Let's see. Question number 4, why are we as citizens taxed at every level of earning and spending to the point that we never truly own anything? I think every American, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or otherwise, should be asking this question. When you earn money, you go out and earn money, and on that money, you're taxed. Your income is taxed at a certain percentage. If you make over $236,000, somewhere in the area, let's just call it $230,000. If you make over $230,000, you're taxed at anywhere between 35 and 37% of your income. That's almost 40% of what you work for every day. Last time I checked, that was me doing this work. Wasn't nobody doing 40% of the work. How is someone taking 40% of the money? But the problem is, it doesn't stop there, because once you have taken your income and paid this tax, now when I go to buy food and groceries and gas and things like that, there's an additional sales tax that has to be paid on those things. And then yet again, when I come home into my house, if I own my home, I have a mortgage, there is a property tax on both my house and my car and any of those things. You have excise taxes, luxury taxes. Everything's just taxed at such a high degree. At the end of the day, you have to look at what you're working for, because that is your income, your livelihood, and say, how much of this am I able to keep? And to the extent that even if I pay my house off, let's say I have a $300,000 house and I pay the entire mortgage off in 15, 20 years, right? Once that house is paid off, if I don't continue to pay the property taxes on it, the government can still come and take my house away from me that I paid for. So there's a problem there with the taxation in this country. I think that's a question that needs to be asked. I think it's a conversation that every American should be having and talking to their representatives in Congress about, because I think we've gone too far. I think the government is overreaching dramatically in that area as far as how they are taxing us as citizens and what they're doing with our money. So that's another one. Last one, question number 5 is, what will it take for our government to cease and desist in perpetuating systemic racism in America against Black America? You and I know the conversation for that. So uh, we want to talk about what is it going to take. And so there are those that are advocates for reparations. Um, I tend to support reparations, but with some limitations to it, and some structure to it, as well as who is deserving of it. Primarily meaning American descendants of slavery, or ADOS is the synonym that's used for that. But I think that's the conversation to be had. I think it's time that this country's government stood up and said, hey, yeah, there's a segment of our population that has been done wrong in our country historically. And that is a stain on our history. And we need to make that right. I think we need to make it right in order for the country to move on. But you got to have our honest conversations about it, right? You can't have one side trying to pretend like it doesn't exist, or that wasn't me, that was my great great grandparents, so we had nothing to do with that. Yeah, I understand that, but that particular action has perpetuated itself throughout our history, and so it's just still there and it won't go away. So I think that's a real conversation that needs to be had, not as a political move or anything like that, but a real conversation. And then finally, I threw in a bonus question for anyone who hasn't seen the cover. But the bonus question is, why does America continue to pretend it is an empire that will never fail? People that don't pay attention to news, some people just don't pay attention to news and economics and stuff like that. Our country is in a very sensitive place right now, and we have been either one of or the only global superpower on the planet for quite some time. But any of us that knows history understands that every empire throughout history has always come to an end. It has always failed. And I think we are teetering with that if we don't take some moral turpitude, if you will, take some more responsibility and look at some things, and act in a sensible manner. Those are my 5/6 questions. With just a quick synopsis of what made me ask them and the things that concern me, to the extent that I put it on paper. But that's pretty much what the book is about. And it talks about, it gives some data on some of those things, gives some history, and then also gives some abstract ways of looking at certain things. So that's it in a nutshell.
No, I think everyone can kind of see where it's one of those things where, again, I think individually, each one of those questions could be, one of those cocktail conversations of amongst 3 or more people that would take all night long. You wouldn't even get to the other questions, right? Like each one of them would get to that point. Again, like I said, I said at the top, you and I don't necessarily agree on all the viewpoints of some of the things you just said and what we talked about outside of this interview. But at the same time, I don't think it makes your questions and your take less valid, right? And I think that what I hope that we're doing on right now in this show is not necessarily an endorsement, but more so of a demonstration of, here's how each time you have a podcast episode, it doesn't have to be that you're doubling down on but giving a platform to someone that can share a view that may otherwise affect someone in your audience, even if it isn't you as a host, I think has some value. Like I said, I'm taking all this. It's funny, as you're asking those questions, I'm taking them in the context, because here's the thing: the book was done before Monday, right? And so that everyone knows, Monday at the time of this recording was the inauguration, and so I wonder that, I won't ask you now and put you on the spot, but I wonder, would any of those change based on what has happened in the last 72 hours, right? Like these are how would there be certain words that would change? Would there be certain ways that you'd ask the question, understand? So with that said, part of the reason why I thought it was apropos for you to be on right now is because where I think we do agree is that as media professionals, to see where our media has gone to to where even us having this conversation, I can already see right now that there will be the comments of, oh, you're promoting, or, oh, why would you go on? You know, there's going to be that type instead of the provoked conversation of, well, here's what I know. Here's what I'm sharing. Hey, that's a great question, you know? And so I want to be very clear. This is that moment in the show where I'm being very clear about my invitation to you, first and foremost, is not an endorsement, but as a support in asking the questions, learning of a perspective, bringing a community together to just feed you with more information. I think, as you said before, we get to a point where we just have one news channel. So it's not us, but we have so many others that we know. They go through one news channel or that rely on one news source, not asking the question, who's underwriting that spot? Who is it that is the fellow of that company who put their daughter in that newsroom that they had, that was a hire, because like all those different things, they look at it myopically. And so I've always had fun just being the grenade in the room. You know, that's my line.
Right.
I like to throw the grenade to make somebody think, and then them to circle back. And it always happens. We're like, well, do you believe that? And then my answer may be no. My answer may be yes. But did we ask the question? So again, here on this space, I want to commend you for even the title. I think is so profound to just say, here, just 5 questions. Right. This is not the quintessential expertise of the Black conservative for all Black conservatives, right?
Right.
And so I again, that's my art and disclaimer of why I invited you on.
And JC, you make a good point with that. I do want to be clear that I am a conservative, and one of the statements I make in my book, I am unapologetically Black. But I don't speak for all Black people. I don't speak for all Black conservatives. Those are just my thoughts. And the other thing to that is that I love learning, right? And I love, and you, one of the reasons you and I click so well is because we both love debates. We don't have arguments, we have debates. And from a debate, I can ask those questions and maybe get some information that makes me come away thinking differently than I did before I asked the question. And every time I get to learn something new, I absolutely love it. So the questions aren't asked to be a debate, to be an argument, or to push or promote a narrative or a view. The questions are asked just to be able to get some answers, have people chime in with answers. And maybe from that, I get to learn something, a different perspective that I haven't considered before, or maybe someone else gets to learn from my perspective that they hadn't considered before. Either way, if we got some new information and we learned something, we became a better person that day.
I think for sure. One of the things, speaking of debates, I go back and I think about a lot of times I've watched debates, the gotchas where they start talking about flip-flops, right? Not the shoes, but like how you go back and forth. And, any operative will tell you that the coin line is like, time has passed, I have evolved, and I've now see a different point of view. That is, it's almost amazing how true that statement can be and how vanilla or superficial it now presents itself to be, right? Like us having a debate, of course, I'm going to go in saying, this is what I know. This is what I've researched. This is what and then you give me back your rebuttal and what you thought. I get a chance to come back. But now I may have just been opened up to an episode. And it normally happens when I see it like this, where someone's personal story now is a point of view I never even thought of. Right. One of the quick one is like thinking about, I had opportunity to listen to some of the hostages that were in Gaza and things like that. And regardless of where I stood in the whole conflict, just hearing that story and thinking about it, wait, that's a father, that's a mother, they're speaking as someone's grandparent, speaking on behalf of a parent whose child hasn't seen them in X amount of time. Like that is enough, or should be. That is enough that should provoke some pause to say, okay, well now I have no.
Here's the quote. Everything that you know is not everything that there is to know.
Oh yeah, that's facts. Oh, that's easy. That's
right. Because when I go into a conversation, I'm working on everything that I know. That's the only thing I can talk to you about. But what you can always find out in a good, decent conversation is that everything that you know, that's not all there is to know. You can always get some more information.
Oh, that's for
Yeah.
sure. That's for sure. Well, I'm curious. I'll move to a component where I'm interested to know. The same way you were able to prognosticate about the Commanders, right? I won't ask you to be as exact or as spot on, but as much as you're willing to share, I'm very curious. Like, how do you perceive the nation as a whole going forward, and specifically since it's included in your title, from the perspective of the unapologetic Black conservative?
Yes.
What does that, what is this forward-looking vision looking for you as of January 2025, for however long you want to kind of share?
I got you. Yeah. And so for that question, if I may, I'd like to go back and touch on something else you said. I did write this book. It took me a few months, but this was last year, even prior to the election. And so the book's release date was strategically timed for Martin Luther King's birthday and the inauguration. So to that end, now that, to answer your question, now that we are under a new presidential administration, I'm very optimistic about that. And so my thought was to release the book to ask some questions for a new administration with a new 4 years and totally new outlook, and say, hey, here's some questions for you guys. What are you going to do about these things? So that was the strategic timing of that. But yes, I am very optimistic. People can feel how they want to feel about Donald Trump. I don't mind coming out to say I am a supporter of Donald Trump, but I'm not a fanatic. You know what I mean? I know the guy can be a jerk. I know he says things in certain ways that people don't necessarily care for. But for my purposes, the last time he was president, those were the best 4 years financially for me in my lifetime. Just the way that things were set up, how the economy was working, I profited from that heavily. And so I thought that was a strong thing. So to me, when I wake up every day and I consider the things that are best for my household, my family, my grandbabies, it is how much money, how much resources can I put away for them to have generational wealth? What conditions from a national and state level and local level allow me to be able to achieve that goal? And so, in my opinion, Donald Trump sets up an economy where it's better to thrive. I feel like as Black America, some of those things are what we should be looking at, as opposed to someone is telling you that he's a racist, right? Like, we're old enough to remember the 80s with Donald Trump hanging out with Michael Jackson and Mike Tyson and all of these people. Black people loved Trump until he became a Republican and ran for president. But the narrative now suggests that he's a racist. But I digress. My point is, under this administration and with this staff that he is putting in place, I believe we will have a prosperous 4 years. I think we'll have a stable 4 years. One of the things that most people never talked about was the fact that during Donald Trump's first 4 years as president, we didn't have any wars. We wasn't shooting at anybody and nobody was shooting at us. And so he never gets credit for that. But with that being said, I expect a return to stability globally because of his presence. So we'll eliminate some of the wars. We'll get a healthier economy. And one of his main goals is to kind of make our government more efficient. I'm excited about all of those things. And so I want people to just be able to make as much money as they can, store your bag, build your bank account, better your retirement, any of those things during this time, because we change every so often. So when that next change comes, take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be presented to you in this particular 4-year segment.
But I'm curious, how does that what does that prognostication look like from a local level? You, in the role that you sit in Alexandria and in the Commonwealth, how does that look from a local standpoint? I'm looking at the makeup of Alexandria, looking at the makeup of Virginia, looking at the road that's been set prior to this point. What does legislation look like in Virginia? When I say the Commonwealth, because I've spent some time in Virginia, I just say the Commonwealth. Right. But in Virginia, what does that? What do you think? What's the outlook that you have for that? And specifically, let me let me add another angle to that too for the Black conservative.
So when you talk about Virginia as a state, I don't think there's any one answer for that, because each area has its own political dynamic. So your urban areas, your Richmonds, your Alexandrias, your Virginia Beaches, those places are going to still continue to be liberal, and by and large, they'll probably resist any changes that come down from the federal level. Your outer line areas, southwestern Virginia, places like that, Charlottesville, and all of those places, they will probably accept any type of legal mandates that are coming down, and implement them well. And I think it'll help the people at a local level. Most local and states that are of the same party of the sitting president and Congress will generally just fall in line, and so you'll see a lot more of the legislation flow easily. Then you have some that are not, and so they'll resist it a little bit. So I see in Alexandria that things will remain pretty much the status quo for as much as it can. You have a one party monopoly in Alexandria, and I don't think most people understand that. But your mayor is a Democrat, your entire city council is a Democrat, your entire school board is Democratic. And so one of the things we fought for there was to be able to make a change to the voting system, because they have at-large voting. And I believe that we should have voting by neighborhoods or wards, if you will, to where a system to where each ward or community gets to send a delegate to the city council. And so we have those pockets of places that are conservative that would place some conservatives on the city council. That's not what you wanted to know, but I don't think it'll affect any change in those heavy liberal areas, because they will probably resist implementing any policies that the administration might send down.
No, I think that's good. I wasn't necessarily trying to get real, into the weeds with it from a political standpoint. It's just the atmosphere, when I mean, I wish you could have seen me, but you would have thought on Monday that there was, we were in the playoffs, and I had 3 or 4. I had the iPad up, I had the TV on a Foursquare, I had my phone up, like, just because I want to get a sense of where all this is, right? And I'm listening to different things. Go ahead. You were gonna say.
Well, no, I was just going to say, then to answer that question, I think the sentiment has improved from a conservative standpoint. I think people are, I think what happened is people got tired, or as our parents got used to say, they got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when people have lived through 4 years of high prices on everything from rent to food to housing, all of that to cars, they just got tired of like being able to just make it with the income that they were bringing in. And so the sentiment is that the economy will lighten up, and we'll start to see prices come down and inflation come down and all of those things. So people are more open to a conservative leadership at this point. So that seemed to have shifted a little bit during the election and the incoming inauguration.
Well, I think it's one again. Let me provide another salute to you for the audacity, the courage, the conviction, to actually say, hey, you know what? I need to make an impact in this moment in time, whether it's for you or for the legacy of your family, for the benefit of the community. I think what made it very much a cinch for me to ask you to be on today is because where we celebrate art, community, and culture, you do all of that. You took your art to impact the community, and essentially the offspring of that is that you're building a culture that is going to be more enriched by what you've contributed to it than what you haven't. I think the book is going to be very successful. I actually have my order in to receive it, not just as a support, but I think it's one of those things where, yeah, why not? I need to know. The same way that I'd flip over and I'd listen to News Nation, I listen to Fox, CNN, or Democracy Now, or PBS, or NPR, or Joe Rogan. Why would I not, right? And so, again, I have to be very, very clear, just because of where we are in the media space. Not necessarily an endorsement of all the things that are there, but the curiosity is what ties there. So no, this has been great. BX, we got to go through the regular math. please let the people know, how they can get in contact with you. I know you have a lot of irons in the fire. Feel free to share with them. If they're looking like, I need more of this dude, I want to know where to get the book. I want to know what he's doing next. I want to get active in Alexandria. I want to know where he's going to be in the Commonwealth. Help us out. How can we link up with you?
The easiest way to catch me is my email, and that's my name, Broderick, Broderick, at the number 3, followed by the letters X as in X-ray, G as in George, Enterprises. So Broderick at 3xgenterprises.com. It's my email. I'm in it all the time. So if you wanted the easiest way to catch me, you can go to any of the social media routes. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those things. But the quickest and most convenient way to catch me is through that email.
Oh, that's great. Well, I always like taking the last shot at you too. So no TikTok? You're not on TikTok?
Oh, I love TikTok.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know.
Yes,
you mentioned all the social medias, but you didn't say TikTok. And as of this hour, we're good to go on TikTok. So
we're good on TikTok.
I just didn't know. Listen, man, it's a blessing for us to be able to sit here and do this. I hopefully what we've been able to do in the last couple of minutes is share with people the dynamic of our relationship. I just want to push record is all about where community, art, and culture collide. And you, as my brother, as someone who I support in terms of everything that you do, I want you to know that it's an honor to have you on. Thank you for taking the time. And if there's anything that we can do to continue the conversation, I want to be clear to continue the conversation. We're all here for it. And for those of you that are listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I just want to push record. Mixed Grounds is happy to be able to be our sponsor to make sure that we can spend time celebrating community, art, and culture. And until the next time, don't forget to push record.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit olasmedia.com, and be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle Olas Media Studio. I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast, is produced in studios in San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Baja, California. Olas Media is an IVC media company.